Okay, Kenny Bantz, thanks for stopping at Wood Nickel today and playing. We really appreciate it. First question I had for you was, what inspired you to pick up a guitar, and how old were you when you did?
Well, thanks to Wood Nickel for having me. And the first time I picked up a guitar must have been about 10 years old, I think.
Really?
And played off and on then since then, but I really started, I mean, seriously a few times, but then I got caught up in sports and other things as a kid, so I get involved in other things. But I've been playing so for a long time.
And was songwriting, is that your big forte? I mean, you love writing songs?
Oh yeah, yeah. It was a challenge. I started playing guitar seriously. I mean, really seriously. It was a number of years ago, and I got into playing, and I started to play with records and CDs and that type of thing. And then I thought, well, it'd be a real challenge to sing while I played, because to me, the two just didn't seem like that they would. You know, as far as mechanically, would be a tough thing to do. And then when I started to learn to sing, after I learned to sing certain songs, and I liked Neil Young and John Mellencamp and John Lennon and Mark Knopfler, major influences. But once I learned how to sing when I was playing, I thought, oh God, it'd be neat to write my own stuff. And then I just got hooked on it. Once you start writing, I think it's in your blood.
And your first album, You Can't Go Back, when did that come out, and what led you up to that album?
That album's a composite of a number of tunes. That came out in 2005, I believe, and the title song, You Can't Go Back, on that was a song I wrote kind of about, a lot of songs I write about experiences I've had, but I was also reading a John Steinbeck book, Travels with Charlie, and John Steinbeck in New York was a successful writer, and but he'd lost touch with America, he thought, so he took a cross-country trip with his dog Charlie, ended up back in Salinas, California. You know, in his early days, he was a migrant worker back there, and so he went into an old bar he used to haunt, and gets back in this bar, and nobody liked him because he had changed, and everybody else there was the same. And so later on, John's out on this hillside watching the sun go down with Charlie, and he says, "You know, Charlie, I'm just a ghost here and nothing more." And yeah, I've done a lot of traveling. I mean, I kind of ricocheted back and forth between the Northwest and Indiana. And there's been a few times I've had that feeling where I tried to go back to places I'd lived before, but I had changed because of my experiences, and so I wrote You Can't Go Back. That was primarily what that tune was predicated upon.
Wow. Wow. And the new album that just came out, Complete the Circle. Tell me about the process of that, and that's been, what, 2 or 3 years in process to get that done?
Well, the one song on there, The Time Has Come, I wrote that back in, gosh, it was in the early 90s.
Really? Wow.
But then that's evolved since that
Through the
point in
years.
time, because that song was initially maybe about a 4-minute song, but now I think it's close to 10 minutes. And this whole project that has evolved over a number of years, but kind of came to a head with the various social political things we've had going on since George Bush took office, and just had some things I had to say, and so tried to get those out on this album.
And who all worked with you in the new album? I saw you had quite a few major Fort Wayne musicians played on there, and who produced it?
Oh, we had some exceptional people on this project. Matter of fact, it was one of those projects where there's some synchronicity that occurred and some magic occurred.
Excellent. Excellent.
John Gillespie was the producer and engineer on this, and John worked on my first project, but he really helped take that project to another level. Todd Harold was the drummer on this. Todd can play anything.
Yeah, former Wood Nickel employee, by the way.
Yeah, but Todd's, you know, he's a great jazz drummer, but like I said, he can drum anything. Tim Beeler, he's the bass player for Flintville Train, and he came in, played on one song. We have Yeah Yeah Politician Blues is the tune. Dave Streeter plays soprano sax. Extremely talented guy. He played, I guess, John was telling me he played saxophone with the Temptations and Lou Rawls.
Really?
Yeah. Andy Booth, he plays the flute on a couple of songs, and he's just urethral. I mean, it was like this guy came from heaven to play on my own. I felt really fortunate to have him on there. So all these people took it to another level. So I was very fortunate.
And what do you have? What do you have for future plans? I mean, do you want to just continue to write and produce CDs and that type of thing, or do you have any goals or aspirations?
You know, my initial intent right now is, because I really like this project that we just completed, Complete the Circle. So my intent is to try to get that to be heard. I mean, because there's some messages in there that I'd like to get out, some things I'd like to, kind of thought-provoking, and there's some just, I think, really exceptional music on there. And Stephanie, the backup vocalist by the way, she did an exceptional job on that album too, so I'm going to give her due credit too. That's my initial thing, but I have enough material to do two more.
Two more
Projects.
That's good.
We'll see what happens, because I've got a number of new tunes in the hopper, and so I know I'll keep writing. I mean, that's just a part of me, and I'd like to get it to where, probably a goal would be just if you want to get out there so people can hear what you're saying, what you're trying to get across.
Excellent. I got a couple more questions for you. One's kind of an off-the-wall question. I understand you have a connection, kind of an odd connection, to John Mellencamp here in Indiana. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I worked for John.
Wow, you did.
Kind of my craft or my trade where I made a living has been accounting.
Oh, okay.
And I happened to live in Bloomington at the time, and in Bloomington I was working in a job that just wasn't working out for me, and it was really strange. I saw this ad in the paper for the entertainment industry that they needed an accountant, and we went and interviewed with his business manager and Tim, and we hit it off. I mean, in fact, it was one of those things where we sat and probably yacked for 2 or 3 hours.
Oh, really? Excellent.
And then and I thought, oh wow, with my love for music, then it was a natural fit. Yeah. And I got to meet John. John was an inspiration to me. I mean, as far as my songwriting, there was a quick story I'd like to tell you about, and it was like John was working on his Cutting Heads album, and he'd brought in a couple of hitters, Willie Weeks on bass, and Steve Jordan on drums, to work with him on this project. And our administrative offices were right next door to the studio. But the studio was kind of, off limits. I mean, when they're recording, it was business in there, and they didn't want a bunch of people straying in and out. But I thought, man, I got to see these guys work. So they normally would come in and record from like maybe 1 till midnight, 2 in the morning, and our hours were like 8 to 5. So after I'd eaten that night, I came back to the studio.
Yeah.
And so I'm going up, and I worked at the courage to go up, knock on the studio door, and the door comes swinging open, and there's Paulie, the engineer that was working on the job, and he goes, "Oh, Kenny, you're working late tonight." Go, and John was sitting in there with Andy York and Steve and Willie, and with an acoustic guitar, and I said, "Well, Paulie, I wonder if I could come in and listen and watch."
Sure.
And John just smiled at me and said, "Come on in."
Yeah.
And
so
that's
cool.
I went and sat in the corner, like a little church mouse, and they went through this tune. I can't remember which specific song it was. They went through the song 2 or 3 times, and John was explaining it to Steve and the guys, and finally, Steve Jordan goes, "Well, let's go do it." So they went out and they had one large sound room where Steve and the bass player Willie were going to play, and then they had another sound room for Andy York on guitar, and then John was doing the vocals in another. And then, this is before they got their Pro Tools software, and so they were recording on analog tape, 24 track.
Sure.
And what they did is they started to go through the song, and they went through it. I think it was a total of 7 times.
Wow.
But by the 2nd or 3rd time, these guys were on it.
Wow.
They're on. I get goosebumps from it now because it's like you can feel the synergy.
Sure.
And of course, I'm sitting there thinking, well, am I really experiencing this, or is it always like this?
Yeah.
And by the 7th tune, not only were these guys playing the song, but they were embellishing things, adding all colors and textures, and so they come in after that, they did the final cut on it, and Andy York goes, "We were in the zone." And
wow.
it's like,
Excellent.
It was neat. That was a neat experience.
That's excellent. Yeah. Lastly, if someone wants to see you on the net, do you have a website that they could go to?
Yeah, it's KenBantz.com, and that's KenBantz.com.
Okay, great.
So,
well, thanks again, Kenny, for showing up today and playing at Wood Nickel, and good luck in the future.
Hey, thanks for having me, Bob.
Okay,
Take
thanks.
care.